This is Feminist Wellness, and I'm your host, nurse practitioner, functional medicine expert, and life coach, Victoria Albina. I'll show you how to get unstuck, drop the anxiety, perfectionism, and codependency so you can live from your beautiful heart. Welcome, my love. Let's get started. Hello, my love. I hope this finds you doing so well. I cannot stop giggling because I am in the position of the outstanding and amazing Dr. Ellen Vora. Hi, Ellen.
I talk now? It came so suddenly.
First time using a computer, and
I was expecting dinner and candles and okay. Yeah, this is like amateur hour here. Okay, so hi. Like a pro, here we go. Hi, I'm Dr. Ellen Vora. I'm a holistic psychiatrist, which is not exactly a household term, but your listeners are not exactly at the household level with these things. But when I approach mental health, I think about the full portrait of my patients' lives. How are they sleeping and how are they eating? And are they incredibly inflamed? And do they have community or ritual or pleasure or a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives? And it feels like a little bit of a no-brainer when it comes to mental health. These are all actually evidence-based determinants of our mental health, but here we are, and we need a special word to qualify psychiatrists to say that we care about all these other dimensions of our well-being.
I wish we didn't need a special word for it, and I'm glad that you are the holder of that special word because you're a most special animal, and I'm really glad to be here with you.
You too.
Yeah. One thing we were talking about before we hit record is how we are both very sciencey, evidence-based nerdlets, like to nerd pretty hard. I'd say mild to moderate nerding, sometimes moderate to severe in the nerding. Yeah. And we're both witchy women.
Yeah. It's a really fun bridge to be standing on.
It really is, isn't it? Science on the left, witchy on the right.
It's a yin-yang, and it's been a delightful ride for me to, for so long, perform just the nerdiness, to get admission into the boys' clubs and to be considered rational and reasonable and objective. And then it's been a delightful journey to reclaim witchiness in full force, and to realize there's a time and place for the nerding out, but I don't need to be silencing the witchiness. And that is an equal part of my dynamic equilibrium of what makes me me.
And I think what makes you a really efficient clinician, right? That makes you a really beautiful caregiver to folks.
It's really useful to have both compasses.
Yeah. Would that be compasses? So we started talking about this because neither one of us slept well last night. So we're recording this on Tuesday, August 1st, full moon, Venus is retrograde in Leo. Those are the big things, right?
Yeah. We're both feeling it really deeply. Yeah. And I'm here for that. But it's interesting. I think that this might go down in history as my most unhinged podcast episode. No sleep. I'm in grief, and I am just here for the truth without any of the regular executive function layers that make me filter that through. Here's how I think people are ready to hear it.
To which I'll say both amen and hallelujah. Because if you're going to just let it all fly, I think feminist wellness is a pretty good place for that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Gratitude to that.
Right. Do you remember over a decade ago when in between patients, we were both working at a primary care office, we'll just leave it right there, in New York City, and between patients, we would gather in your office or mine and shake it off.
Yeah. Yeah. Or sometimes take a walk in the nearby park. Yeah.
Yeah. Get a little nature.
I mean, there's a download in that for everyone listening, which is that when this river of life sends you in a bend of the river, one of your people, just to have appreciation for that. And also realize that we're worthy of the incredible, special souls that come our way. And to just allow yourself to receive.
Which can feel so challenging sometimes, right?
Yes.
To really allow it in.
It stirs up all of our attachment funkiness.
Yep.
But in a way, this life is short. And we risk missing out on it. There is no future point when then I am worthy of the friendships, then I will receive the relationships. It's right now. And those people in your life, if you're listening, who I really feel my best around that person. I really admire that person. They get me. We laugh in a special kind of way. Just drink it up and know that it is for you. You don't have to be anything other than who you exactly are right now to be worthy of that.
It's a match. Yeah. And you don't have to perform your lovability. Right. You talked about performing your smartness and your rationality. And I get that from the practice of Western medicine. And I see so many of us attempting to perform being lovable, being worthy, being good enough, right? It becomes this mask we wear, this facade between us and really experiencing life.
I am someone who, an overarching umbrella view right now is this saying, trust in Allah, but tie your camel. Kind of like, trust this, surrender to this. There's love and guidance in this for you. And take responsibility for your part and tie the camel. This around. And I think that in terms of performing lovability, I feel like I've always gotten that tension wrong, which was perform the lovability, but don't necessarily do the work on being a better friend. And I'm really trying to see that differently right now, which is there doesn't need to be any performance of lovability, and forever tie your camel, forever do the work of how can you strike the right balance of being pro-social, attuned, other-oriented, and showing up and doing the right thing, being in integrity, right relationship to everybody in your life, everything in your life. And yet also, I think especially for anyone socialized this journey with all the conditioning we get, I think that it's also so important to constantly be balancing that with where do we suppress our own needs in service of others, because that was the message we got. This is what protects your attachment to caregivers. And so that's, I think, a double balance that is central to how do we receive those people on our path.
Right. Which brings to mind intentionality for me, right? And just being very intentional with your reaching out, with your bids for connection, and with a gentle, graceful self-love, asking why. We'll say, are you in people pleasing, people proving? Are you chasing people? Are you chasing people so that they'll validate you, so that you can tell a story about the connection? Or are you actually looking to connect, right? And where are you staying in things that may not actually be filling you up and filling your cup, and that may not be interdependent, right? That may not have mutuality and reciprocity at the base of them. Again, towards some sort of story that just feeds your ego and not your actual experience of life.
Something else I've noticed myself too, and I don't know how many people with whom this will resonate, but I will sometimes stay in the relationship that's safe and comfortable, though not filling my cup, not bringing out the best in me. And I stay very shy around the relationship that's the one that actually lights me up. And don't invest in that because the stakes feel higher. You feel more vulnerable there. And so we stay shy, we miss out.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that that's a really common experience. Probably one many of us haven't stepped into inquiry around, but it's an interesting one, right? Where are we giving a quarter of ourselves, right? Versus actually showing up in our wholeness. I get that, right? Like, oh, I think she's so cool. She's so amazing. And she could probably never be my friend. I'm probably not good enough. So I'll just show up in like this little portion of me, like this tiny little part of me that like maybe she'll like. So if I show up my whole self and she rejects it, then that's like this mortal blow to my ego, to my sense of self, which may be tenuous at best to start with, right?
There's, of course, an Ani DeFranco lyric to back this concept where she said,
girl, please.
I like you so much. I talk to everyone but you.
You know what? Ooh. Oh, Ani. Oh, Ani. Side note, I must say, one of my favorite memories of you and your husband is being at a holiday party at the primary care office where we work.
I'm right there with you.
You're right there with me. This is, again, a decade ago. And our Indigo girls sing along at the actual top of our volume. Like,
top of our lungs?
Lungs. Thank you.
You're just singing from the top of your lungs. Just a shallow little tight breath.
Oh my God, that was so amazing to sing Closer to Fine that loud.
Yeah.
With you and Simone.
Yeah. No, I have a real cosmic buddy in that.
Yeah, you do. He's pretty special. Yeah. It's interesting to think about the healing is both available in partnership, and for so many of us, the healing we get to do in order to be ready to receive our cosmic buddy, our true loving partner, right?
That's right. I think for me, I had a lot of reparenting that happened in an earlier relationship. And, whether I was reparented by the partner, reparenting myself in that safe container, I think it was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But I think that readied me to receive, but then also realizing where I was unsatisfied in an earlier partnership helped me not exit when I found myself unsatisfied in a current partnership. It helped me see that that's my pattern, nothing to do with the other person's failings.
Oh, projection's a bitch, ain't it?
That should be the bumper sticker.
So I'm actually having them printed as we speak. But it is. I mean, if you're listening and you're wanting a relationship that feels loving and healing and whole and good, one of these first steps is awareness of your own patterns, right? The things that trigger you, the things that activate you. When I say triggered, I always mean in the clinical sense, right? Like what's actually freaking out your nervous system, not like, did they get your salad wrong at Sweet Greens? Right?
You're saying those are mutually exclusive?
I'm saying that being hashtag triggered because you're annoyed is not actually what we're talking about. There's a difference between discomfort and trigger, right? That's a whole other show though. Let's have that conversation because that's a good one.
The way that fast cash and the errors that happen is emblematic of how we've gotten to a really dark place with late stage capitalism and how people's souls are rebelling and that it inconveniences hungry people and how that's its own indication of how we're so troubled these days. So I think that there is actually some depth to the hashtag triggered that we get into at Sweet Green.
I mean, I think that's really interesting. Will you say more about that?
That's like,
are you? Oh, okay. I don't know if you were thinking of like, the concept of tools of the week and being, we can problematize that term, but being late for the factory job when it's like the only way you can show your displeasure.
Yeah.
Are you saying putting chickpeas instead of apples is a moment of that?
I guess I always have more to say. So I think
you always have more to say. Come on now.
So, and I don't mean to romanticize a vision of a different economy, a different culture, but let's say you're in a completely different world where everyone's work is something that they take pride in and something that exists in an energy exchange that's reasonable and tenable and balanced for them. And so it's, I'm a fisherman. I keep this shop. It's my baby. I pour love and effort into this. I want to make a meaningful contribution. I want to enrich the world. And this industriousness that I do keeps me intact. And that is a tenable energy exchange between what we put into work and what we get back from work. And I think that we're in a moment right now where everything has gotten so many layers of it's abstract, it's intangible, it's not our own baby, it's very much someone else's baby. They're not even necessarily in their own alignment. I've been thinking a lot about the concept of freedom takers and freedom givers, that some people are at the top of the food chain and they've gotten there mainly because they're very cunning about how to take freedom from laborers, whereas other people realize that they are in a role where their blood, sweat, and tears is providing somebody else freedom, not merely subsisting you.
Right.
And I think that the problems that happen at Sweet Green are actually emblematic of how someone is working that job and it's such an untenable and unsustainable situation that there's no pride in it, but there's a very healthy soul rebellion against doing that job with pride sometimes. And I actually tend to think grand scheme, like Sweet Green kind of works and it's kind of a good thing. But I think that that's where we're at so often.
Right.
And it is triggering to everyone involved.
As always, an excellent point. Yeah.
And this is our food. We imbibe it. We incorporate it into ourselves. And
it becomes us.
Be made with love versus made with somebody who's in a feeling of desperation. It energetically charges the food.
Yeah. It's an excellent point. This neo-feudal state we're in, right? This neo-feudal economy is interesting to begin to think about it on that level of, I think a lot about food production and the farms from which I get my food, which is an incredible privilege I have. I live in the Hudson Valley. It's a beautiful place, right? I bought a quarter cow. If I'm going to eat meat as an Argentine, I'm grass-fed organic, meow, 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 Ellen. Come on now. Come on.
It's the Maria Victoria Albina equivalent of yada, yada, yada.
Exactly. Exactly, with the touch of nobody slept last night. But yeah, it is interesting to get down to the level of the human interaction with the food, which makes sense. I was reading something yesterday. Okay, I know I was about to give a disclaimer of don't laugh at me, but it's you. The frequency of fabric. Mm-hmm. Of course, you've thought about this, but I had not. And like cotton and wool and linen have a frequency that is most resonant with the human body, which like makes logic, right?
Yeah. And meanwhile, and I was the sort of champion of the athleisure movement, and I wanted to feel like I look appropriate for work, but I know secretly I'm wearing pajamas, and this easy, moisture wicking, quick drying, flattering, falling fabrics are plastic and PFAS and forever chemicals and endocrine disruptors. And we're absorbing it through our skin. It is such an underappreciated dimension of health is we focus a fair amount on what we put in our mouths.
Right.
But anything on our skin, we're absorbing to some extent, whether that's makeup or sunscreen or perfume or leggings. And so, yeah, I'm starting the slow and financially sustainable approach to transitioning what fabrics touch the skin in my household and from all of these plastics to something that came from animals and or the earth.
Yeah. One of the areas you and I have been talking about the nervous system and polyvagal and autonomic, right? We've been talking this talk for over a decade together, well over a decade, right? With our little nervous system shake it out resets. And I'm really glad that it's gaining some popularity and that it's a hashtag trending. People are talking about it, right? And one of the areas that I'm not seeing in conversation is toxicity trauma. Right? Like the trauma, well, just the trauma and the impact to the autonomic nervous system of having a chemical onslaught from the world.
Yeah.
Right? It is sympathetically activating.
This is such a tricky both and, because here's the thing. So we understand somewhat in these circles, increasingly, the role of trauma and how that's locking limbic systems into a state of hyperarousal. The foot is stuck on the gas pedal. And I think that there's only one direction you want to go from there. You want to heal that. You want to work on the level of the body. You want to metabolize that trauma and move forward.
Yeah.
When it comes to toxicants that we're exposed to, it's a delicate dance all the way forward as well, because we are a little bit stuck between a rock and a hard place, considering that we don't live in the shadow of an active volcano in a healthy agrarian community where the soil is good, where the food has integrity. Here in this soil, what we have to do to decrease exposures to toxicants is live in a pretty high maintenance way.
Yes.
And it's come to my attention that in an effort to consume high vibration food, we can find ourselves in a lot of low vibration pitfalls around that, fearing food, feeling like the body is fragile, becoming obsessive, letting meal prep become a part-time job, declining social invitations to break bread with friends. Of course, not bread. Who would possibly tolerate bread? No witches in this country. Right. I think that lucky few. And I think that this is the task at hand, is this delicate balance where we feed ourselves nourishing, high vibration food with transparency, with integrity, with love in its cells, but we do it with maintaining an attitude of ease and a focus on pleasure. And it has to be affordable and convenient. It's a tall order.
It is.
And so it's a journey out of toxic trauma, but I do think it's really hard on our nervous systems. And that's the whole first half of my book is false anxiety, that it's not our core essence, the way we're anxious so much of the time. It's unnecessary suffering related to these seemingly innocuous aspects of modern life that tip our physiology out of balance and generate a stress response. And we're anxious, but it's actually that our blood sugar's crashing and we're sleep deprived, hungover, over caffeinated, and there's inflammatory molecules coursing through our veins.
Well said, as always. First, I'll say again, amen and hallelujah. And what I hear you pointing to is intentionality once more, right? Presence, mindfulness, intentionality. Why are you skipping that meal out with the girls? Right? Which again, because my bend, right? Where's the codependency there, right? Where's the people pleasing and perfectionism that tells you if the girls are like, oh, who's getting a drink? that it would be problematic for you to say, oh no, I'm just having water, right? And where will that people pleasing kick in, where you'll eat the pizza and you'll drink the booze and you'll stay out way too late, like you'll skip the things that truly serve what feels like your wellness.
I'm going to follow out a couple half-baked thoughts and we'll just see where this goes.
Love your half-baked thoughts. They're my favorite.
One relates to in childhood, if you have a pretty socially wired brain, you figure out quickly what behaviors protect your attachment to your primary caregivers.
Right.
In amazingly rare and perfect circumstances, those behaviors are also your true and authentic self. And so much of the time, it's a suppression of your needs. It's a shift into inauthenticity. It's a you were left-handed and now you need to be right-handed. And I think that what I've learned about myself is that I was probably just enough on the spectrum that I wasn't wired to figure out what behaviors would protect attachment. So I didn't do it. And that came with some negative consequences, but it also gave me a lifetime of muscle memory of being like, I'll have the water. And of course, there's a record scratch because all of the socially wired people in the room are like, what? But we're bonding over wine. We're wine mommies. This is what we do.
Right.
And, but I also think that I really root for other people to find their dose of where can you record scratch the room in a self-loving reclamation of, well, this is my need and there's nothing inherently wrong with this and I'm not hurting anybody and I'm going to drink water.
So what advice would you give folks?
I think on the one hand, you have to find your people so that you're not always alienated. You need to find the other people like, let's go out for water.
Let's go. I feel like most of our dates hanging out this decade have been walks.
It's effectively an elaborate way of going out for water. And, and so you find your people so that you're not always in a state of alienation. But in those moments when you are out of sync and you want to care for yourself, but also go along with the people that you have legacy friendships with, even if they're bonding over wine, to just get comfortable with it. And most of the time, that fear around saying, I want water when everyone's getting a drink, the anticipation is the worst phase of that. Mm-hmm. And then when it's an awkward conversation with a waiter, when it's an awkward conversation with someone at the table, turns out that you witnessing yourself kind of without shame or without a lot of drama, just being like, this is what I'm doing right now. I choose this. It helps me feel good. You get a real dose of self-efficacy from witnessing yourself having that exchange.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to just start tiptoeing toward that. Baby kitten
steps.
and just try those conversations. And then you test, how do you feel before, during, and after?
Right.
And I think that even navigating the choices themselves gets tricky because then we could get very all or nothing and tied to an identity of I'm a non-drinker, I'm a this, or I'm a that. I learned this from a friend of mine. Her name is Kimberly Ann Johnson. She's written a few books called The Wild, I believe is her most recent book. And she was about to go on a Wim Hof breathwork cold plunge trip. And she said to herself, why am I doing this?
Why on earth are you doing that? Yeah.
And her answer was, because I love myself. And to me, that's the frame. So why am I having the water? Because I love myself. Why am I choosing the wine tonight? Because I love myself. Why am I having the gelato? Because I love myself. Why am I not having the gelato? Because I love myself. There is no hard and fast rule of it's always the answer is the water and the no gelato. Hard and fast rule is what is the choice of radical self-love in that moment? And it will vary moment to moment.
Absolutely. And you're right. The way to get there is kitten stepping, right? So I talk a lot about thought bridges. We don't BS ourselves, right? In this family, we learn what's true and what's authentic for us. And we set goals and move gently towards them because the nervous system, it's got a bullshitometer, right? And when it smells garbage and lies, right, which is often what happens with like a CBT kind of framework, right? I'm amazing. I'm so incredible and I love myself. Your body's just like, you know what? Buff, I'm cool with that. I'm done with you. You thought you were depressed before. You thought you had a little false anxiety before. You had a little true anxiety. You want a little bit? Here you go.
Live out of integrity with your words. There you go.
There you go. Done.
So the framing I use for this is always the Marshall B. Rosenberg, true yes, true no. And I've learned to take that sacred pause. If I'm faced with should I meet up with this person for coffee? Should I take on this work assignment? I check in with my body. Does my body feel expansive and warm? My true full yes in my body versus do I feel a sense of contraction, coldness, tightness, overwhelm? It's usually my true no. And every once in a while, you're at a phase of life, you're in a situation where you do have to hand out your false yes. We try not to. And I feel like the most of the work is in just catching ourselves when we're about to give a false yes, realizing that story never ends well. We commit to something and we flake at the last minute, we go through with it, we've compromised other priorities, or we just go through with it and we resent the other person. And you think about it from the other side, you wouldn't want someone to say yes to you if it meant they were going to resent you.
No way.
Workplaces and different phases of our career, there are times when you have to give a false yes. And I think it's so important in that moment to have a wink to yourself. And so you're not in betrayal of the fact that your body said, pretty sure we said no. How come you just said yes? But it's a wink. It's I hear you and I agree. This is a no. And here we are. And because I love myself in this moment, we're going to give a yes, but noted that this is out of alignment. And we're going to circle back on this later.
I love that, the wink to yourself, the little wink and a nod, right? That idea of being your own ally, your own advocate, your own co-conspirator, right, in life.
Yeah.
And learning to have your own back, slowly learning to have your own back.
One time a patient said, this feels like I'm in couples therapy with my body. And I love that. I think that it is interesting, this deranged world that got us into a bad marriage with our own internal physical experience. And whether it feels like, in her case, it was, why is her digestion so bad? Why can she, not lose weight? And why can I not stop binging? That's what was coming up. And I think that when we see it as like, what's wrong with this partner? They're the reason for my troubles, and externalize the blame to that. When in fact, it's how do I more properly communicate with this partner? How can I listen? How can I understand their perspective and attune and actually really celebrate and root for them?
Yeah, and take their concerns seriously.
Yeah.
Right? So when the body says bellyache, okay, my love, I hear you with the bellyache and the heartburn and the joint pain and the et cetera. The migrating motor complex got a lot of opinions. Having spent many years treating a lot of SIBO, got a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
And they're mostly, if you're stressed and you're angry at me, I'm going to send you into sympathetic. I'm going to stop digesting.
And that's something that the small intestine is so at that interface between nervous system, sort of, whether it's directly through trauma or through toxicant trauma. I think both are doing similar paralysis to our digestive tracts.
Yeah. And once again, self-love is the answer.
And then I think can pan out and see that as not purely self-love of this individual walking this earth, but, and this is, everyone is free to have such a different variation on this worldview or a completely different worldview, but something along the lines of, what even is it to be in this meat sack and to be this experience of consciousness and this identity? And is it actually such a self the way we perceive it to be?
I knew you were going non-duality. Just you had the non-duality look to your face.
I've been treating anxiety for long enough now that I needed a salve for that truest of true anxieties, which is the inherent fragility of walking this earth in a human body, the fact that we will one day die, the fact that we lose the people that we love, the fact that there is suffering, and what do we do with that? And for me, when I'm faced with these moments, the salve has been to arrive at a stance where I believe that there is something vastly beyond our comprehension occurring here, and that makes it comfortable for me to trust it, to surrender to it, to learn from it. And it's not the spiritual bypass of everything happens for a reason. It's the resilient and enriching experience of, well, this S just happened, and how do I make meaning of that? How do I move through that? How do I learn from that? And for me, and I've kind of come out of the closet and just talk very gaudy about this stuff now at this point, but it's like, what in my reaction to this is not God? Where am I still in fear now and not in this dual assignment, which I think on the one hand is work. And I think we're here perhaps shifting the fear in this galaxy to love, think that's part of the work we're here to do. It's almost like the galaxy has this body, and where it still has cancer, where it's still out of balance, is where we're still in fear.
Right.
And if we can chip away at that and shift that towards love, it's treating the SIBO of the galaxy. But I think that that's one part of the assignment. But the other part of the assignment is maybe to be divine and to slow down into density just enough to have a physical experience, to taste food, to experience the sacred sexual pleasure, to dance, to enjoy music, and just to bask in this nature masterpiece. And I think that that is another equal part of the assignment. And I find that being curious and seeking around these themes of what is actually happening here, and is this something that I can lean into and accept and trust and surrender to, helps quite a lot when there's loss and when there's the big existential fear. Loss is not quite so absolute in that framing.
Right. In non-duality, there is no loss.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
I wish I could say I'm there. I'm not there yet. That's where my Indigo Girls partner is way ahead of me.
Say more about Vimmel, please.
He's steeped in the non-duality right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What does that look like?
He has fewer blood sugar crashes.
Than you do, or than he used to?
Than he used to.
I think that's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I've been treating his false anxieties all this time, but it turns out meditation was the thing.
It's really shocking how often the answer is a snack and some meditation. Like a 5-minute sit in the Target parking lot in your car, eat a snack, close your eyes, get still.
Yeah.
Right? Be with self, which is to be with the universe. Yeah. I think New York City agrees. I don't know if folks listening to the podcast could hear the siren, but New York City was like, amen. We got you. We're with you.
In the police siren way, it knows how to communicate.
Right. It's the only way. New York's got a lot of ways to communicate. Let's be clear. Let's be very clear. If your N or your R has ever turned into a Q in the middle of the night, like trying to get home after a show, and you're like, why am I where I am? Well, New York.
Oh, New York. I appreciate this about it.
Yeah. My nervous system, I miss a lot about it, but my nervous system is so much more chill up here in the country.
Yep. I feel that instantly when I get out of the city.
It's pretty wild how it impacts like legit everything. Yeah.
Yep. And then we acclimate in a way that's almost more unsettling, because when you've acclimated to New York, I don't think it means that your nervous system is downshifted.
No.
It's just a sense fatigue. You don't smell it anymore.
Right. Well, it's like functional freeze. Like you're just inured to it instead of like actually being in any kind of real peace. I think we have like 400 podcasts that we should do based on the things we've like touched on in this time together. Maybe we should have our own podcast.
That'd be interesting.
That'd be really fun. All right, we'll work on that because we don't have anything else going, right?
The global ascension and
right? That's cool. I want to make sure that we talk about your incredible book. If you have not read The Anatomy of Anxiety, I've talked about it on the show before. It's amazing. It's incredible. Ellen, it's so friggin' good.
Thank you. I really appreciate your support of it. It's fun to write a book. It's quite a birthing experience.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of Beyonce videos to really get through the artistic process. I needed that level of inspiration, the way she channels source energy. I think she's in constant communication with source. And I think she's complicated. There's a lot of different competing themes coming through these days.
Right.
I think she's a light worker. And I think that she knows how to channel source energy and make art on this earth plane. And so I had to watch a lot of Beyonce videos to get myself back in my chair, typing on the laptop to actually tie that camel, because that was a lot of work. But it's such a beautiful birthing process because humans inherently want to enrich life. We want to make a contribution. And I feel like this is such an important message for us all to receive, is that we just all have some unique combination of perspective and the things that light us up and the things that come a little more naturally to us than to other people. And my moon is a Gemini, and I'm here to communicate it and to be a bridge between the nerdiness and the witchiness, and then to somehow be able to translate that. Yeah, it's my life's work in 250 pages, and I feel good about it. And also there's so many things I now disagree with myself, 3 years later. So that's why people write second books.
Right. Yep. And you can always do a reprint, right? A new edition. But I think this is a beautiful baby. And I think you've done a brilliant job really elucidating this thing that folks aren't talking about, this difference between false and true anxiety. And I want to make sure that folks hear about that because we talked about false anxiety without really defining it.
Yeah.
And it's really life-changing.
So here's the central thesis of the book. False anxiety, which I realize now a year and a half into a book tour, is an incredibly #triggering term. And so importantly, it's not to invalidate the very real experience of this type of anxiety. This is life-altering suffering. The pain is real.
Yeah.
But false anxiety is avoidable anxiety. It doesn't need to be happening. It doesn't serve some greater purpose. It's based in the physical body, and it occurs when something has tipped our nervous system out of balance. It's usually some seemingly innocuous aspect of modern life. You're in a blood sugar crash, you had an extra cold brew coffee, you're hungover, you're sleep deprived, you were up doom scrolling till 1 a.m., it was the full moon, you're feeling that, which I wouldn't say is totally false. And then inflammation is a really big common factor there as well. And I think we would do well to address it at the level of the physical body, identify that root cause of false anxiety, address it, eliminate, and avoid unnecessary suffering. And that's just a whole fun project to do with patients. I use an inventory. We'll go through, why do you think you might be anxious right now? And it's important sometimes to validate because our brain, the brain is always going to brain. And part of its role is to make meaning of physical sensory input. And so we'll be in a moment of peak anxiety and our brain will say, I know I'm anxious right now. It's this thing happening at work and it's this interpersonal dynamic from the 7th grade that still irks me. And our brain is consummate meaning maker. What that actually is a retrofitted justification of what is first and foremost a physical sensation. The brain is attempting to tell us a story to make sense of what's going on in the physical body. And there's always a kernel of truth to what it tells us. So in that moment, as you go through the false mood inventory or the false anxiety inventory, you might say to yourself, yeah, I'm feeling stressed right now. I'm overwhelmed. I'm anxious. I give myself permission to feel that way. It's understandable. This thing is going on at work. And maybe I need a snack right now.
Yep.
Maybe I'm getting my period tomorrow. Maybe I'm due for my dose of medication. I am in a state of interdose withdrawal. And so just to identify it, sometimes there's an actionable solution. It's let me have a snack. Let me go outside, move my body in the fresh air and sunshine. Sometimes it just takes the charge out of the situation to know I'm getting my period tomorrow. And so I'm probably feeling a little more raw, a little more tender right now. I'm due for my dose of medication. It's not that things are as doom and gloom and overwhelming as they feel. I'm seeing things through a biochemical lens of withdrawal. And so it's just powerful to have that grounding. That's the false anxiety. True anxiety, on the other hand, is purposeful anxiety. It's not something that we get to decaf coffee or gluten-free our way out of. It's not even what's wrong with us. True anxiety is what's right with us when we're able to viscerally connect to what's wrong in the world. And that can be on a very personal level. It can be the ways that we're out of alignment in our lives, whether that's career, relationship, where we live, how we live. And it can have to do with our communities. It can have to do with the world at large. But wherever we have a unique role in course correcting something that's out of alignment. And our true anxiety is not something to suppress. It's not something to pathologize. It's something to listen to and honor and heed.
Great teacher, eh?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes a little bit of a body whisperer, sometimes a body shouter, if we ignore it long enough. And I really feel it in my own life, like a little electric fence. It nudges me back on course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you, in hindsight, what would you call false anxiety now?
That's the trouble. I'm too married to the symmetry of that. And I think I'm actually just going to keep going with it's not a perfect term. And yet, let's just put that caveat in there and move forward with the imperfect term. I think avoidable anxiety is less triggering for sure. Yeah. But I think that, I don't know if you'll help me wordsmith, what's the true...
I mean, it's exogenous, but I can see from publishing a book for regular people, having it be exogenous and endogenous anxiety. It doesn't really, I can see your publisher being like, absolutely not. 0% available for that. But that's what you're talking about, right?
I think that's a really good thought. Yeah. So I think exogenous and endogenous works, but I think it doesn't even capture the full...
Right, because I guess what I'm calling endogenous is really your reaction to imbalance. Well,
I think there you mean true anxiety is endogenous. And I think it can be, but it's not always. And
right.
Yeah.
It's a pickle.
Ego dystonic. It's a pickle.
Sure.
So here we are.
Here we are. I like your disclaimer. And I think, I don't know, and I am profoundly biased, but you just resonate such authentic, true kindness that I could see somebody getting grumped by a book, but then seeing like 2 seconds of a video of you being like, hi, I'm a genuinely kind, wonderful person. You takes the sting out, at least it would for me, but I am biased.
That's fair. I mean, I think that I remember reading or coming across this recently, this idea that some people are counselors, that's their natural gift, and some people are consolers, and that's their natural gift. And I think that there's a lot of different ways that my book rubs people the wrong way. And I think a big part of that is that I am by nature not a consoler, I'm a counselor. And I think we need to know what we need. You know, if you're feeling unwitnessed, unheard, invalidated, let's start with consoling, because we have some distance to make up first.
Right.
I come out of the gates counseling, and it's giving diet culture sometimes, you know, like counseling is a real tricky business. And I so desperately want to give someone tools to help them move the needle and genuinely feel better. And I don't feel like I can achieve that just through consolation. But I think that the delicate art of how do you counsel in a way that reminds somebody they are their own guru, that reminds them that they are whole already, that they're not broken, they're not fundamentally wrong, but that we're living in a world that makes it pretty tricky to feel well. And how do we counsel someone to know, here's what I can nudge Kitty's steps to do slightly differently to feel better, but without all the messaging of, I'm broken, I'm wrong, I need to change, or the anxiety-provoking feeling of, oh God, I have so much to do to get it perfect. And I think that it's a gentle, grace-giving approach to, here's some strategies, here's a buffet, I lay it all out. What resonates, what feels approachable, what feels accessible, start there and only there.
My brain just went to how much of a consoler I am. And I feel like that we shared so many patients. So many people would see like a you-me sandwich, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really interesting. I need to sit with that and think about that. But
when we hopped on this Zoom, and I'm in a moment of grief right now, and I felt the enormous hug of your consolation gift, and it's such an important offering. You actually have quite a lot of talent with counseling as well. So you got the yin and the yang.
Oh, thank you, Kitten. Dr. Ellen Vora, MD, I adore you.
It's mutual.
Is there anything you want the good people to know? I think this interview has been about 16 hours at this point. We should probably let them go to bed.
Here's what's alive in me right now. I could say something about community. I think that if you prioritize nothing else other than sleep, it's community. And that's actually what we're here to do. I think that's part of this assignment is relationship and learning love. And I think part of the reason we are suffering so much is that this modern world has disconnected us so many important ways, so many consequential ways. But I also just want to comment on grief for a moment, because that's very alive in me. And you know this, I think a lot of your listeners know this, but we're really stunted culturally in terms of our relationship to grief. And we have a lot of metabolized grief, and that can be from losing a loved one. It can be from transitions in your life that you never had the time or the space or the permission to fully mourn. But I think that I just want people to give themselves permission to cry enormously, to have the full spectrum of complex, nuanced, ambivalent thoughts about whatever is lost. Give yourself the grace to have shadow thoughts and all of it. It's okay. It doesn't make you bad. We integrate it and we realize that we contain these multitudes. And I think that with crying, what I've learned through 2 different big griefs in my life is that we cry at like a 3. And it's good to get something worth working at is to get better at crying, and to cry at an 11. And that is really medicine and moves the energy. And there is so much connection to the sacred in grief.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for holding all this wisdom. Thank you for sharing it with us in your classically Ellen eloquence. Something I've always loved about how you can turn a phrase and, as a counselor, share things that are complex in such an accessible way without ever talking down to us. I love that.
I'm in this right alongside everyone, but thank you for all of these offerings that you've made to the world. So much good teaching and consolation. I'm honored to get to be on your path.
Folks, please go buy Ellen's book. It's amazing. The Anatomy of Anxiety. Also, the cover is just beautiful. Where can the good folks follow you, keep up with you, learn more about you, work with you?
I'm a chatty Cathy over at Instagram. I'm at Ellen Vora, MD, and then my website, ellenvora.com. And this fall, if I get another pep talk from my friend and Victoria Albina, I'm going to start an online group. That's coming.
We've been talking about this for a really long time. Get it, Ellen, get it. Also, do you remember, this was pre-pandemic 2018, we had this conversation where you were like, what is Instagram? Like, we were both just kind of like, I don't know, but I think we should maybe make pictures there. But neither one of us knew. And now you have a bajillion very engaged followers learning so much from your brilliance.
I'll be the first to say I think social media is such a destructive force, but man, is there a useful conversation happening in that town square.
I learned a lot. I got to say it. I learned so much.
I learn a lot, and I think I keep my thyroid healthy expressing my truth there.
Well, I love that. Let that throat chakra sing. And I learned a great new way to clean the grout in the shower yesterday. Like, I got to tell you, reels are great. With like everything else, with boundaries and time limits and not letting it be that first dopamine hit of the morning, nor the blue screen at night, but somewhere around 1 p.m., a little 20 minutes with a timer, it's magic.
Yeah.
I learn a lot, and it's a good time. You're a good time. Thanks for being here, Ellen. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
My love, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Vora just as much as I did. I hope you got some sleep during last week's full moon. And if not, just know that there's a whole community of tuned in humans who are lying awake all night alongside you. All right, my beauties, let's do what we do. Gentle hand on your heart should you feel so moved. And remember, you are safe, you are held, you are loved. And when one of us heals, we help heal the world. Be well, my darling. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Feminist Wellness. If you want to learn more all about somatics, what the heck that word means and why it matters for your life, head on over to victoriaalbina.com/somatics webinar for a free webinar all about it. Have a beautiful day, my darling, and I'll see you next week. Ciao!